I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing out a coffee cup, when the phone rang. It was my son, Jonathan. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice tight, like he'd been rehearsing. "Can we talk for a sec?" I dried my hands on the towel, smiled to myself, already picturing him asking if I had any extra ribbon left for the centerpieces. "Of course, sweetheart. What's going on?" There was a pause, not hesitation, something colder, calculated. And then he said it. "I think it might be best if you didn't come to the wedding." I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" He sighed, not annoyed but exhausted, like I was the one making this hard. "It's just easier this way, Mom. Less drama. You know how things have been. Lila doesn't feel comfortable, and honestly, neither do I." The cup slipped slightly in my grip. I steadied it. My voice didn't shake, not yet. "You don't feel comfortable with your own mother at your wedding?" "I'm not saying you're not important," he rushed, "but it's not about that. We need the day to go smoothly. Lila's parents are hosting, and the vibe, well, you and Lila have never really clicked, and, and, and. I wasn't angry. Not in that moment. I wasn't even sad. I was stunned. Like someone had suddenly turned off the lights, and I was still blinking, trying to adjust. "Jonathan, I bought your tuxedo. I paid the deposit for the venue. I covered the catering. I know," he cut in, sharp now. "And we're grateful. But Lila thinks it'll just create confusion if you're there. People will ask questions, it's her day too." My jaw clenched. The cup in my hand still had a smear of lipstick on the rim from this morning. I set it in the drying rack, very gently. "I see," I said, though I didn't. "Not really. Please don't make this harder than it already is," Jonathan said, and I could hear it, the tightening in his throat, the edge of guilt curling under his words. But not enough. Not nearly enough. "I won't make a scene," I said quietly. "You have my word. I won't be there." Another pause. I waited for him to take it back, to say, "What am I doing? Of course I want you there, Mom." But all he said was, "Thank you." And then the line went dead. I stood there, in my kitchen, in the house I bought so he could grow up safe, and realized that somewhere between diapers and diploma, someone else had rewritten my place in his life, and I hadn't even noticed. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed with the phone still on the nightstand, screen down, like it had done something shameful. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful. It pressed in on me, heavy and constant, like a ceiling slowly lowering inch by inch. And in that dark, airless stillness, I went backward. Back to when Jonathan was 6 years old and had a fever so high I sat up with him all night, a cold washcloth on his forehead, whispering stories just to keep him from crying. Back to when he was 11 and got punched in the stomach by a boy twice his size, and I taught him how to stand tall even when it hurt. Back to when he was 17 and heartbroken for the first time, and I made grilled cheese and listened, even when all he did was sigh between mouthfuls. He was always mine. Not as a possession, but as something I built from love and hope and sleepless nights. After his father died, it was just the two of us. No one else, just Jonathan and me, figuring it out, paycheck to paycheck. I bought him his first car. It was an old Honda with rust on the bumper, but he loved it. I remember how he beamed when I handed him the keys. "You didn't have to do this, Mom," he'd said. And I smiled, like it hadn't meant I skipped my own dental work again that year. I paid for his college, not all of it, but enough to keep him from drowning in loans. I packed care boxes every other month, cookies, razors, dumb little notes on sticky pads that said things like, "Don't forget who you are." He kept those notes, for a while anyway. And when he got his first apartment after graduation, tiny, carpeted, smelled like mildew, I helped with the deposit. I bought the dishes, I sewed the curtains, I even found the dog he still has, Bella. She was a rescue, like us. It wasn't just money, it was presence. It was pride. I was there. Every game, every concert, every scraped knee and tax return. I wasn't perfect. God knows I wasn't. But I showed up, and he always told me that mattered more than anything. So what changed? How did we go from "you're my hero, Mom" to "please don't come"? I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket tighter, but it didn't warm me. There's a chill that doesn't come from air. It comes from erasure. And once it settles in your bones, it takes a long, long time to thaw. Her name was Leela. And from the very first handshake, I felt it. Not hostility, not cruelty, just vacancy. A polite, polished absence. She smiled the way someone does when they've already decided who you are. And they're not impressed. Jonathan brought her over for dinner on a Sunday. I made baked ziti, garlic bread, salad with cranberries. All his favourites. I'd even lit candles. Silly, maybe, but I wanted it to feel warm. I wanted her to feel welcome. She walked in wearing a cream blazer and heels, indoors, and handed me a bottle of wine I didn't recognise. "It's organic," she said, "from a small vineyard in Sonoma. Probably too dry for this kind of meal, but it's elegant." I smiled and thanked her. I set the wine on the counter and offered to open it later. She didn't take her coat off. During dinner, she complimented the food. Eventually. But only after asking if the pasta was gluten-free and if the dressing was store-bought. I brushed it off. Some people need time to relax. Jonathan, for his part, looked like a puppy trying to keep two older dogs from growling at each other. He kept changing the subject. Work, weather, traffic. At one point, he spilled a little water on the table and scrambled for a napkin like it was a crisis. Lila noticed, of course. She gave him this look. It wasn't cruel, just efficient. As if she were constantly measuring how close or far he was from her expectations. After dinner, while Jonathan loaded the dishwasher, I offered her tea. She declined. "Caffeine makes me sharp, and I prefer to be soft after 7, she said, not smiling. I didn't know what that meant, but I laughed politely. She didn't. I asked her where she grew up. "Various places," she said. "We moved a lot. My father was an academic." I asked what she did. "Strategy consulting," she answered. No elaboration. No warmth. Still, I tried. I really did. But I remember standing at the sink that night after they left, washing the dishes by hand even though I didn't need to, just needing to move, and thinking, she doesn't like me. Not in the way daughters-in-law sometimes bristle or push back. This was deeper, colder. It wasn't personal. And that's what made it hurt more. She didn't hate me. She just didn't plan for me. I wasn't in the picture she imagined for her future, and worse, she didn't see why I should be. It started small. So small I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. First was the dress shopping. One afternoon I got a group text from Jonathan that said, "Lila found the dress today," with a photo of her in something sleek and backless, holding a flute of champagne in a room full of mirrors and white. I blinked at the screen. My chest tightened just a little. No invite, no heads up. I'd always thought I'd be there for that moment, sitting in a corner chair, tearing up, whispering, "That's the one." But the photo was already taken. The moment had passed without me. I typed, "She looks beautiful," and put my phone down. Next came the cake tasting. I only knew it had happened because I overheard Jonathan mention pistachio buttercream when we were at the grocery store. I paused, smiled, said, "That sounds interesting," and he just nodded like it wasn't worth explaining. When I asked gently, just gently, if they'd like help with favours or decor, Jonathan said, "Lila's got it all organised through Pinterest and her planner. You wouldn't believe how detailed she is." His tone wasn't unkind, but it carried an edge, like my offers weren't helpful, just intrusive. Then it was my name. She stopped calling me Mrs. Whitman after the first few visits. Not that I wanted to be formal, but what came next wasn't warmth. She started using just Diana, flat, neutral, no affection, no invitation. "Jonathan, can you grab Diana's jacket?" Diana will text you about the rehearsal. Not your mum, not even your mother. Just a name, like she'd pulled it from a folder tab. Once, at brunch with some of Jonathan's college friends, I watched Lila introduce everyone around the table. This is Marcy, my maid of honor. That's Rachel, our florist. Oh, and this is Diana. No title, no context, no trace of pride or joy. I smiled anyway. I always smiled, because I didn't want to be that mother, the overbearing one, the dramatic one. I told myself I was being sensitive, that not everything was about me, that I should just be happy Jonathan was in love. But the distance wasn't imagined. It was structured, intentional, like I was being gently, politely, erased. Not with malice, not even with argument, just with a mission. And you'd be amazed how much a heart can bleed from 1,000 little paper cuts no one else can see. I kept paying. Even as the invitations dwindled, even as the silences grew longer between messages, even as I started to feel like a stranger circling a house I used to live in, I kept writing the checks. At first, it made sense. I'd always planned to help Jonathan with the wedding. I didn't come from money, but I'd saved. Every birthday, every holiday, every tax refund I didn't spend. I put a little away in what I called the someday box. Someday turned into dresses and venues and dinner for 100. When they found the venue, some restored farmhouse with exposed beams and chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a movie, Jonathan called me first. It's beautiful, Mom. Way over budget, but Lila loves it. And then, almost like a whisper, he added, she doesn't want help, but I know we need it. So I offered to cover the deposit. Just the deposit. He sounded so relieved when I said yes. Then came the catering. She's vegan now, Jonathan explained, so it's this plant-based thing, really nice, but more expensive than we thought. And the DJ, and the transportation for out-of-town guests, the chairs, the linens, the signature cocktail. Every time it was just one more thing. But what I remember most is the silence that followed each payment. No thank you. No text from Lila. No card. Not even a "we appreciate it" from Jonathan. The money went out and vanished like a sigh in winter. Once I asked Jonathan if they'd picked the photographer. He said, Lila's best friend from college does weddings. She's giving us a discount. We already put down a deposit. I smiled, even though I hadn't heard about it until that moment. Well, let me know if you need help covering the rest, I said. Jonathan hesitated. We were kind of hoping you already would. I wired the money that afternoon. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. That love didn't keep a ledger. That a parent gives because they can, not because they're owed anything back. But every time I opened my online banking app and saw the dwindling numbers, I couldn't help but feel like I was slowly buying my way into a room that someone had already locked behind me. And what's worse than not being invited is paying for a celebration you're no longer welcome to witness. It had been in my dresser drawer for 33 years. A delicate gold band with a sapphire centre, my mother's engagement ring, passed down through her side of the family, worn through war and widowhood, quiet dinners, and loud holidays. She gave it to me when I turned 25, said it was for the next woman to hold the family steady. I always knew I'd give it to Jonathan's future wife. I imagined taking it out of its velvet box one evening, in a quiet, personal moment, maybe over tea, maybe after a long conversation about love and loss and strength. I imagined saying something like, "This ring has been through a lot. I hope it sees you through joy." I imagined her crying. I imagined her understanding. That was before Lila. One evening, I opened the wedding registry out of curiosity. I hadn't been sent the link. Jonathan mentioned it offhandedly during a phone call, like it didn't really matter. It's mostly just a formality, he said. We're not really doing the gift thing. Still, I looked. It was a sleek, impersonal site. White background, black serif font, curated for aesthetics, matching champagne flutes, a $700 Dutch oven. hand-woven throw pillows from somewhere in Scandinavia. And then I saw it. Under a section titled Sentimental Additions, there was a photograph of my mother's ring. Antique family ring, pre-claimed by Lila's maid of honor as bridal party contribution. My mouth went dry. I clicked the thumbnail, thinking it might be something similar. But it was unmistakable. The scratches on the edge of the setting, the narrow bend where the band had once been resized. It was my mother's. Mine. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen like it had just slapped me. No one had asked. No one had told me. And yet somehow the ring had already been claimed, categorized, itemized, spoken for. It wasn't even listed as from me. I called Jonathan. He didn't pick up. I didn't leave a message. I went upstairs, opened the drawer and checked the box. Empty. At some point, maybe during that weekend they stayed over, maybe while I was making coffee, someone had taken it, quietly, like it was theirs all along. And in that moment, I didn't feel sad. I felt stolen, not just of a ring, but of my role, my meaning, my moment. They didn't just take the heirloom, they removed the heirloom's keeper. I found out at a bridal shower I wasn't supposed to attend. It was held at Lila's cousin's house, whitewashed walls, linen napkins, catered macarons in pastel towers. I came because Jonathan asked me to. Just show your face for an hour, he said. It'll mean a lot. I dressed carefully, wore the pale blue blouse Jonathan once said made me look calm and wise. I brought a gift, French hand towels wrapped with a satin ribbon, and I smiled at every person who gave me that awkward half nod like they weren't sure what I was still doing there. Lila didn't speak to me once. I lingered near the gift table, sipping lukewarm tea, when I noticed the seating chart propped up on an easel. A calligraphed dream of a board, names written in gold ink on parchment tied with silk bows. I leaned in, searching for mine. It wasn't there, not under parents of the groom, not anywhere. At first, I thought maybe a mistake, a misprint, a missed update. Then I saw it. A small stack of scratch-outs at the bottom, crossed through names in faded ink. Mine among them. Not erased, just struck out. Visible, deliberate. In my place? Lila's godparents. And an influencer couple I'd never heard of. I checked again. Maybe they moved me to another table. Friends? Extended family? Nothing. I stepped outside and called Jonathan. He answered after 2 rings, breathless like he knew this call was coming. Why am I not on the seating chart? I asked, my voice low, even. There was a long pause, then a sigh. Lila thinks, your energy stresses her out? I blinked. My energy? She wants the day to feel light, joyful, peaceful, and with everything that's been happening, she just feels like your presence might create tension. My throat tightened. So I won't have a seat at my own son's wedding. Don't say it like that, he said quickly. It's not personal. I almost laughed. Not personal, of course, just strategic, efficient, like pruning a branch that grew in the wrong direction. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I said, okay, and hung up. I walked back into the party, smiled politely, said my goodbyes, and left my unopened gift on the table like a tombstone. By the time I got to my car, the tea in my stomach had turned to stone. Not because they didn't want me there, but because they didn't care if I knew. I shouldn't have gone to the rehearsal, but I did. Maybe some part of me still believed that if I showed up, smiled enough, stayed quiet enough, they'd remember who I was. Maybe Jonathan would look at me, really look at me, and something in his face would soften. Maybe he'd say, I'm glad you're here, Mom. I would have settled for that. The chapel was beautiful, white-walled, high-ceilinged, a little too cold for June. Everyone moved like they were part of a silent ballet. Lila in cream, not quite white. Jonathan in his suit, tugging at the collar like a boy dressed up for church. Her mother was directing people like a conductor. Chairs here, candles there, aisle music not too loud. I stood near the back, clutching a small clutch bag with a backup boutonniere I had made. No one noticed. When it came time to run through the ceremony, Lila turned, surveyed the crowd, and said, "Let's keep this clean. Immediate family up front only." Her eyes met mine for just a second. No smile, no nod. Nothing. Jonathan stood beside her. He didn't say a word. I stepped back, further, into the shadow near the pews. I wasn't assigned a row. There was no place for me to sit. After the rehearsal, people milled around, taking photos, laughing. Someone uncorked sparkling cider. I stood by the door for 10 full minutes, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. No one did. I turned and walked out. The sun had dipped behind the trees. My heels clicked against the pavement like accusations. I climbed into my car, shut the door, and just sat there. At first, I stared at the dashboard. The little orange light blinked. Low fuel. I almost laughed. Even my car wanted to leave. And then the tears came. Not a trickle. Not graceful. They came hard, shoulders shaking, breath catching, the kind of sobbing that only happens when you realize you don't belong to the people you built your life around. I gripped the steering wheel like it could hold me together. 30 years of motherhood. And I'd been written out like a mistake on paper. Erased, but still faintly visible. A ghost under new ink. The worst part? It wasn't rage. It wasn't betrayal. It was grief. That specific hollow grief you feel when you're still alive. But someone's already begun to mourn the version of you they don't want anymore. I didn't sleep that night either. At 4:30 in the morning, I got out of bed, pulled on an old cardigan, and padded barefoot down the hall to the room that used to be Jonathan's. The posters were gone, the shelves were dusted, but I still kept the desk the same. Same drawer handles, same little nick in the wood where he once carved his initials with a compass. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the folder. Not just any folder, the one labelled in my handwriting, wedding planning, active. It was thick, heavy with emails, receipts, contracts, timelines. I spread it all out on the desk, one sheet at a time. Page after page of promises I had made, money I had moved, commitments I had sealed with my own name. Venue. Deposit, $6,500 catering. First payment, $4,800 DJ services, $1,200 florals, $3,900 stationery, save the dates and invitations, $1,450 dress tailoring reimbursement, $900 and on. A dozen little tabs divided the chaos. Decor, vendors, guest accommodations, each tab like a chapter in a story I thought I was part of. A story I was helping write. Every signature at the bottom of every contract was mine. Not Jonathan's, not Lila's. Mine. Every bill routed through my account, every confirmation sent to my email. Every point of contact, me. They hadn't just taken my help, they'd structured the whole damn thing around it. And now they wanted to cut me out, neatly, quietly, while still using the structure I'd built to hold everything up. I flipped to the gift list. I'd bought Lila's bridal robe, the embroidered handkerchiefs for the bridesmaids, the vintage cake server she'd circled in a catalogue and then left on my kitchen table, by accident. I had the invoice for that, too. I'd spent close to $32,000, and somehow I was the problem. Too controlling. Too intense. Stressing the energy, they said. But as I sat there in the quiet morning light just beginning to grey the sky outside, I didn't feel like a villain. I felt like a woman who had financed her own erasure. And suddenly, I wasn't crying anymore. Suddenly, I was thinking. Because if everything lived in my name, if every signature was mine, then maybe I wasn't the one who didn't belong. Maybe I was the one with all the power. I made the call just after sunrise. The sky was still soft and pale outside the window, the kind of early light that doesn't yet know what kind of day it wants to be. I sat at the kitchen table, folder open beside me, phone in hand, heart steady. The wedding coordinator's name was Emily. We'd spoken dozens of times over the past few months. She was young, bright, efficient, always cheerful. She picked up on the second ring. Hi, Diana. So glad you called. Was just about to send you the final floral mock-ups. They turned out gorgeous, by the way. I took a breath. Emily, I need you to pause everything. There was a small silence. Pause. Yes, actually cancel. Another pause. Longer this time. Cancel everything? Yes. Effective immediately. I could hear her clicking on a keyboard. Diana, forgive me, I'm just trying to understand. This is very last minute. Is something wrong with the venue? The vendor contracts are all finalised. I'm retracting all payments, I said, my voice calm, firm. The bride and groom have asked me to step away. So I will. Fully. Emily went quiet. Then, softly, I see. I could hear her tone shift, professional armour clicking into place. I'll begin the cancellation process, she said. There will be some forfeits, of course, non-refundable portions. I'm aware. And, just to confirm, you're the signatory on all contracts. Yes, I said. Everyone. She exhaled a quiet acceptance. Understood. I'll notify the vendors by end of day. You'll receive confirmation emails. Thank you, Emily. I hung up and stared at the phone. I'd expected to feel a rush, vindication, power, anger. But all I felt was quiet. Like setting down a heavy suitcase I didn't know I'd been carrying. The silence that followed wasn't the kind I'd come to dread. It wasn't hollow. It was still, full. I sat there for a long time, letting it fill the room. Letting it fill me. Because they had told me to step back, to disappear, to not show up. So I did. I stepped all the way out. With dignity. With clarity. And if the walls of their wedding came crashing down because they forgot who held up the beams, well, that's not on me anymore. The first message came before noon. Jonathan. Mum, what the hell did you do? Emily says everything's cancelled. Is this some kind of sick joke? I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another one. You can't do this. Do you have any idea what you've done? The florist, the catering, the venue. Everything's falling apart. Then came the phone call. I let it ring. Then the texts started to blend. Anger, guilt, pleading. Talk to me. This isn't fair. You're ruining the happiest day of my life. I stared at the screen until it went dark. 10 minutes passed. Then came Lila. The first message was almost poetic in its venom. You are an unstable, bitter woman. I always knew there was something wrong with you. The next one was worse. Jonathan may be blind to it, but I'm not. You manipulate with money, you demand control, and then play the victim. It's pathetic. I put the phone down, walked into the other room, sat on the couch with a blanket over my lap. The house was so quiet, I could hear the refrigerator hum, the faint tick of the hallway clock. Outside, a bird landed on the porch railing and chirped once before flying off again. I breathed in, breathed out. I didn't respond, not out of weakness, out of choice. Because I knew what would happen if I did. They'd twist my words, weaponize my sadness, cast me again in the role they'd written for me, the dramatic mother, the martyr, the storm. So I stayed silent, let them scream into the void, let them panic. Let them write their furious little plays. I'd left the stage. At 3:42 p.m., Jonathan wrote again. Just admit it. You're toxic. You've always been toxic. I stared at those words. And then, I smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not even a bitter one. A quiet one. The kind that comes when truth stops hurting and just becomes air. If I'm toxic, I whispered into the silence, then let them detox without me. And I meant it. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they didn't get to have my absence and my funding. They didn't get to exile me and still live inside the palace I paid to build. This was not revenge. It was release. I waited until nightfall. The house felt different after dark, not lonelier, just more honest. The distractions faded. The noise of the day stilled. You could hear your own heartbeat again. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the binder. It was thick, neatly labelled, wrapped in floral fabric, something I'd sewn myself after the engagement. Inside were 6 months of notes, plans, revisions, swatches of linen pinned to the pages, vendor cards held in place with gold clips, colour palettes, menu samples, seating drafts, music cues. Each page, a piece of me, each tab, a soft promise that I would help make this beautiful. I brought it to the fireplace. No music, no candles, no wine, just quiet. And matches. I sat cross-legged on the rug, laid the binder in my lap, and opened to the first page. Venue options, pros, and cons. I remembered the night I made that list, how excited Jonathan had been about the idea of an outdoor ceremony. "You always loved gardens, Mom," he'd said. I tore the page out slowly, folded it once, then again, placed it into the fire. The edges curled immediately, turned to lace, then to nothing. One by one, I fed it all in. The guest list, the floral sketch, the floor plan with Diana written in faded pencil at table 2, later crossed out. A receipt for champagne glasses I bought when Lila mentioned she wanted something vintage. Gone. Even the swatch of pale grey satin that matched her bridesmaids' dresses, the one she said looked cheap, not realising I'd already ordered the fabric. I let it burn. No rage, no theatrics, just closure, one page at a time. A pile of glittery stickers. Burned. A thank you card template I printed but never sent. Burned. A sketch Jonathan made of their initials inside a tree. Burned. By the time I reached the back cover, my hands smelled of ash and paper. The fire had settled into a low, calm glow. I stared into it and whispered, "I built this day." Then watched the last page curl inward, and I just deleted it. Not because I was bitter, because I was done. Done with being edited out while still being asked to decorate the margins. Done with being the architect no one acknowledged in the final photograph. They wanted me to disappear, so I did, but I took the foundation with me. I hadn't spoken to Margaret in almost 2 years, not since I updated my will after Jonathan's graduation. But when I called her office and said, "It's Diana Whitman. I need to come in today," she didn't hesitate, just said, 10:30, I'll be ready. Margaret Chen is not a dramatic woman. She doesn't need to raise her voice or wave her hands. She has the kind of presence that makes men sit straighter and younger attorneys take notes in silence. When I walked into her office, she stood, extended a hand, and gave me a look that said everything. I don't need the story yet, but I know it's going to be good. I handed her the folder, contracts, invoices, my name at the bottom of every single page. She flipped through them quickly with practiced eyes. "Everything here is under your authority?" "Yes," I said. "No co-signers?" "No." She gave a single nod. "Then let's make this official." She drafted the first letter in silence. I watched the words appear on the screen. "To whom it may concern. This letter serves as formal notice that all services previously arranged for the Whitman-McAllister wedding, scheduled for June 24th, are hereby cancelled by Diana Whitman, sole contract holder and financial guarantor. Furthermore, no third party is authorised to reinstate or modify said contracts on her behalf. Any attempt to do so will be considered fraudulent and subject to legal consequence. Sincerely, Diana Whitman." Margaret turned the screen toward me. "Do you approve?" I nodded. My voice caught for just a moment. "Send it." "Good," she said, clicking her mouse. "I'll email copies to each vendor and send hard copies certified mail. You'll be protected." "Will they retaliate?" I asked quietly. "Publicly?" "If they do," she said, "let them. You have documentation. You have receipts. And now you have legal backup." She leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp. "They used your generosity as leverage. That ends today." I exhaled, slow, deep, the kind of breath that comes after a tightrope walk when you finally reach solid ground. I didn't want it to come to this. I murmured. I know, she said gently, but they made a choice. You're just following through. She printed the letters, folded them into envelopes, and placed them in a neat stack beside her. 23 in total. Not revenge, not spite. A statement. The end of pretending I had no say in what I built, and the beginning of remembering I do. The post went live less than 24 hours after Margaret mailed the letters. It was a photo of Lila, curled on a sofa, mascara smudged just enough to look unintentional. A tissue in one hand. The caption was long, crafted, like a slow knife. I never imagined I'd be writing this, it began. But I guess when someone is jealous enough, they'll destroy anything. I read every word. Twice. She sabotaged our wedding. Out of spite. Out of control, out of bitterness, after everything we tried to do to include her. 100 likes within minutes. The comments came fast like a well-rehearsed choir. You deserve better. Stay strong, girl. She sounds toxic. Cut her off. Family isn't always blood. Then the hashtags. Survivor bride, sabotaged wedding, healing over hate. Jonathan reposted it with a single heart emoji. I closed the app. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went upstairs, brewed a cup of peppermint tea, and sat in the reading chair that still smelled faintly of lemon oil and lavender. By the time I finished the last sip, things had shifted. I opened my phone again, not to respond, just to watch. Someone had commented, "Didn't she pay for everything, though?" Lila didn't reply. Another comment, "My cousin works for the venue. Diana Whitman was on every single contract." Then a screenshot, the deposit confirmation email, my name, my address, the date. And then it unraveled. A former vendor chimed in anonymously, posting a cropped invoice with my initials. A cousin from Jonathan's side wrote, "Funny how the jealous mother also bought the dress Lila picked out." One by one, the curated narrative cracked like glass under pressure. The followers that had cheered now hesitated. Wait, is this true? This feels off. Are we getting the full story? I didn't say a word. I didn't post, didn't comment, didn't share. Silence was my armor now. Let them dig. Let them peel back the layers. Let the truth crawl out on its own without my help. I sat on my porch that evening, the sun dipping low, casting gold across the fence. My phone buzzed beside me, notifications climbing. I looked at the screen. I didn't touch it. I'd spent too many years explaining myself. Now they could explain me to each other. Let them war online, hashtag their heartbreaks. I had nothing left to defend. The truth doesn't need volume. It just needs time. It was nearly midnight when I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. I hadn't touched it in years. The hinges creaked like they were remembering too. Inside were baby clothes, soft and yellowed around the edges. A worn blanket with a frayed satin trim. A music box that hadn't worked since the Bush administration, and under it all, a bundle of folded papers tied with a red ribbon. I pulled them out carefully, sat cross-legged on the carpet, and untied the knot. They were letters, not many, just a handful. All written by Jonathan. One said, "I love you, Mommy, so much," in wobbly crayon. Another, "Dear Mom, I'm sorry I lied about brushing my teeth, I love you." One had a drawing of us holding hands, stick figures with triangle bodies, and a sun smiling in the sky. I read each one slowly, like they were sacred, because to me they were. Each mom written in giant untrained loops, each "I love you" free of hesitation, not yet polished into adulthood's vague distance. He had once been a boy who trusted me completely, who climbed into my lap without asking, who whispered secrets into my hair, who made me birthday cards out of construction paper and glue and thought I was the most important person on earth. And now he reposted lies for strangers to applaud. Not because he was evil, not because he hated me, but because it was easier. Easier to believe the story Lila told him. Easier to pick one side than stand in the storm. Easier to reduce me to a headline than wrestle with the truth. I laid the letters in my lap and looked around the room. It hadn't changed much. The same lamp, the same framed photos on the dresser. One of Jonathan at age 10 with his gap-toothed grin and baseball cap slightly crooked. I stared at that photo for a long time. He wasn't always this way, but now he is. That was the hardest part. Letting go of the version of him I still carried like a photo in my wallet. The little boy who once said, "Don't ever die, okay?" after I read him a bedtime story. That boy was gone. And this man who chose silence over defense, distance over decency, was real. I pressed the letters back into the chest, tied the ribbon tight again. Sometimes you don't lose people all at once. You lose them in layers, one choice at a time. The next morning I made coffee without thinking. 2 sugars, no cream. Just the way Jonathan used to like it when he'd visit in college and pretend he didn't still need his mother. The house was still. The light came in through the kitchen window soft and gold, catching on the rim of my favourite mug. I sat at the table, the warmth between my hands comforting. Familiar. And then I opened my laptop and started to type. Not an email. A letter. Dear Jonathan, I don't know what version of me you're being shown, but I want you to remember the real one. The one who held your hand when you had nightmares. The one who packed your lunches, stayed up late editing your college essays, and sat on freezing bleachers for your soccer games, win or lose. I want you to know that I never needed to be the center of your wedding, but I did expect to be treated like someone who mattered. Instead, I was asked to disappear. I was asked to fund a future I wasn't welcome in. I was asked to erase myself and smile while doing it. You don't have to love me the way you used to. I understand that people grow, shift, rearrange their hearts. But you do not get to rewrite the past to make your current choices more comfortable. You do not get to call me controlling, toxic, dramatic, just because I stopped saying yes. You do not get to call what I gave manipulation now that you no longer need it. I made mistakes. Plenty. But everything I did, every hour I worked, every bill I paid, every time I stayed silent when I should have spoken, was because I believed in you. I believed in the man I raised. And maybe you are still that man, somewhere under all the noise. But right now, I can't find him. And I won't chase him. When you're ready to know the truth, not the version that flatters your pride or protects your comfort, but the real truth, you'll find this letter. I folded the page, slipped it into an envelope, wrote his full name in cursive across the front. I didn't seal it, didn't stamp it. I opened the old roll-top desk in the hallway and slid the letter into the back drawer. Then I closed it gently. Not with finality, but with peace. He'll find it if he ever looks, and if he doesn't, that tells me everything I need to know. It was the day of the wedding, or rather, the day there was supposed to be one. I woke up early without meaning to, the kind of early that used to mean frosting cupcakes or steaming a dress. But there was no chaos now, just stillness. The sky outside was washed in soft grey, the kind that makes you want to linger under blankets, not run toward altar arches and monogrammed signage. I made toast. Sat with a book I didn't open. Let the coffee go cold. By noon, my phone began buzzing. Not from Jonathan. Not from Lila. From guests. One message. Hey, is this really cancelled? We're at the venue and there's no one here. Another. I think there's been a mistake. The doors are locked. Someone said the space was booked for a different couple. I set the phone down. Opened Instagram. A post from the venue's page appeared at the top of my feed. Congratulations to Sam and Daisy. What a beautiful June ceremony. I tapped the photo. There it was. The same garden, same barn doors, same white folding chairs and string lights. But different names, different faces. The space had been fully rebooked. Someone had even commented, "Wait, Wasn't this supposed to be the Whitman-McAllister wedding? The venue replied simply. Contract was cancelled by original client. This event is unrelated. More messages rolled in. Photos of the empty parking lot. A screenshot of the catering truck parked miles away at a different event. Confused guests in floral dresses holding unanswered texts. Then came the ripple. A bridesmaid posted, "I don't know what's going on. No ceremony. No explanation." Someone shared a blurry photo of the inside of the hall. Bare walls, no flowers, no music. Just silence and the echo of what was supposed to be. Then came the questions. Did something happen? Why didn't anyone tell us? And finally, where is Jonathan? I watched it all unfold from the same kitchen table where I once helped him fill out college applications, where I sorted receipts, where I wrote the first check to reserve that venue. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, it wasn't vindication, it was confirmation. The truth always arrives. Sometimes loudly, sometimes slowly, but always, eventually. And when it does, it doesn't need banners or drama. Just an empty hall and a room full of people wondering where the love went and why the woman who gave it wasn't invited. It started with a single message. Jonathan's aunt, my late husband's sister, sent a short, trembling line of text. "I'm so sorry, Diana. I had no idea." I stared at it for a moment before replying with a simple, "Thank you." Then another came. From one of Jonathan's childhood friends, Mark. He hadn't been in touch in years. "Hey, I saw what happened. Just wanted to say, none of this makes sense. You were always the one holding things together. We all knew that." Then a longer one. From someone I didn't even know, a woman named Elaine, apparently one of Lila's former co-workers. She wrote, "I hope you don't find this intrusive, but I used to work with Lila. When I saw her post, I recognized the pattern. You're not the first woman she's tried to isolate and discredit. You might be the first who didn't let her win." I sat back in my chair, letting the words settle. I hadn't asked for this wave, hadn't expected it, but it came. And with it, clarity. Stories began to spread, quiet ones, measured, from people who had been watching from the sidelines, unsure of what to believe. Vendors, neighbours, cousins, even Jonathan's godfather called me. "Diana, I'm ashamed to say I believed her at first. I thought maybe you were trying to control things, but then I saw the invoices. Your name was everywhere. You were the reason any of this existed." There was no smugness in his voice, just regret. And I didn't rub it in. I didn't gloat. I just listened. Because when truth finally arrives, you don't need to raise your voice. You just need to let it be heard. For so long, I'd carried the weight alone, shouldering their plans, funding their fantasies, biting my tongue when they twisted the narrative. I'd watched them paint me as a problem while standing on the very platform I built. Now, one by one, people were stepping back, looking again, seeing clearly. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with fireworks. It was quiet, dignified, like a room slowly filling with light after too long in shadow. And as it happened, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt seen, not as a villain, not even as a victim, just as a woman who gave too much, and finally remembered she didn't have to. That was enough for me. That was everything. The call came at 7:14 p.m. I was folding towels in the laundry room, the scent of lavender softener rising in warm waves from the dryer. Outside, the sky was glowing pink-orange, the kind of sky that used to make Jonathan call from his college dorm just to say, "Did you see the sunset tonight?" I heard the phone buzz from the kitchen counter. I didn't rush to it. When I walked in, I already knew. The screen lit up. Jonathan Whitman. I stood there, just staring at his name glowing against the dark, not blinking, not moving. There was a time I would have answered before the first ring ended. Would have picked up with my breath still catching from hurrying. Would have said, "Hi, sweetheart," before he could say hello. But not now. Now I just watched. Watched the screen pulse, watched the call roll through the full length of the ring cycle. I didn't feel anger, not even sorrow, just stillness, like the wind had finally stopped howling against a house that no longer had windows left to break. The phone buzzed again. Voicemail. Then silence. I didn't press play. A few minutes later, a text appeared. Can we talk? No accusations this time, no demands, just that simple plea. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Not because I was punishing him, not because I was proving a point, because nothing I said now would change the weight of what had already been done. And some bridges aren't burned in flames. They're slowly dissolved by years of disregard. I folded the last towel, stacked it neatly. The phone vibrated one more time. I turned it over, face down on the countertop. Then I turned off the kitchen light. It was quiet, whole. I didn't cry, didn't clench my jaw, didn't whisper his name like a wound. I just whispered, no, not to him, to myself. Because that's what healing is sometimes. Not a grand breakthrough, not a perfect closure, just a quiet choice, a new muscle, slowly building. The strength to see the phone light up with the name of the boy you once would have walked through fire for, and still choose to stay exactly where you are. Not out of bitterness, but because peace is a place. And I had finally arrived. I booked the trip the same day the florist confirmed cancellation, Ocean View Suite, adults only. Far enough away that no one knew me, close enough that I didn't have to explain why I needed to go. 3 nights, no schedule, no ceremony, no apologies, just stillness. Now I was here, on a wide balcony wrapped in sea air, the sun melting into the horizon like gold poured into water. Waves rolled in, steady and endless, the same sound I used to play on a sleep machine when Jonathan was a baby. I had a glass of something cold in my hand, something dry and floral and just bitter enough to feel honest. I was wearing the dress I never got to wear to the wedding. Soft blue, simple lines, sleeves that made me feel elegant. I'd packed it out of habit, then almost left it in the suitcase. But tonight it was mine. No one to impress. No one to shrink for. I leaned back in the chair, my bare feet propped on the railing, and stared at the edge of the world. No makeup, no ceremony, no script, just me. My phone buzzed beside me on the table. Another text, another notification, another voice from the crowd that once asked me to be quiet. I didn't even look. Instead, I opened the camera app, framed the horizon. In the foreground, my hand holding the glass. Behind it, endless blue. I snapped the photo, added a caption. You can't uninvite the foundation. Then I posted it. No hashtags, no geotag. Just a message floating into the ether like a message in a bottle. I watched the screen for a few seconds. 1 like, 2. Didn't matter. I went into settings, scrolled to the bottom, power off. The screen faded to black. I set the phone down, face down, and felt the weight leave my shoulders like dust shaking free from a coat I didn't need anymore. They had taken my seat at the table, so I built a new one. They'd written me out of the day, so I took the whole damn chapter back. They called me bitter. Maybe I was. But bitter things can still bloom. Out on that balcony with salt on my skin and fire in the sky, I didn't feel erased. I felt rewritten by my own hand, by my own voice, and this time, no one gets to cross me out. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story felt close to your heart, give it a like, subscribe if you want to be part of a space where real stories matter. Got a couple more minutes? Check out the next story. It's also about the things we rarely say out loud.